All right, David Dodge, thank you so much for joining us today. Green Energy Futures is your initiative. Super cool thing. You guys are super big in the media right now. You guys are just about doing weekly episodes. You've had some great traction on those as well. Really focusing on carbon neutral futures, energies, all those things. Tell us about the future. Tell us what Green Energy Futures is all about.
Well, when I started, it's ironic because, man, the world has changed. I got to tell you, in the last decade, I would never have projected what's happened.
Yeah.
Because when I started Green Energy Futures, I was motivated because I saw coverage of clean tech in the media and I was appalled. Like, they didn't even understand the technology or how to do stories about it. And it was terrible. And so I said, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to start my own media service. Dumbest thing you could ever do. And so I did, and but I was very fortunate. I was able to raise a really good pile of money from some very unlikely suspects who bought into the vision. And the vision was to only cover clean tech, green buildings, and energy transition, no fossil fuels. And that was the vision I put out there. It was like one of those dream visions, you know? You sit down and you go, if I could do anything in my life right now, what would it be? So I wrote it up. I sent it off to some folks I knew at Suncor and a few other places, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
They loved it.
Yeah.
And so they supported me along with Shell and TD and some other companies for the first 3 or 4 or maybe 5 years. So I was able to travel Canada back and forth many times, covering every single clean technology you could think of, and talking to the brightest, the most passionate, the most knowledgeable people in the country. And so it was like doing a master's or a PhD and getting paid to do it, because you get to learn about all these things from the guys who are doing it, not from the theoretical guys, but from the folks who are actually on the ground, trying to make a living, breaking new ground. It was really quite thrilling, actually.
Yeah. Well, looking at some of your stories, I mean, some of the families that you've gone and interviewed and their transition from their homes into like these off the grid and so on and so forth. Really cool stories, and they've gotten great traction. So you said, like, you know, you were really surprised and it's blown you away about the change that we've seen in the last even 10 years and arguably the last 5 years. What would you say is the most interesting or the most shocking change that you've noticed?
Well, I think it's all connected. There's a bunch of things that are all connected. First of all, renewable energy became the cheapest energy money can buy in the last 5 years. And now it's like really clearly the cheapest, and it's still going to get cheaper. That's a big shock. The fact that climate change has traction now. Everybody's talking about it. I hear individual homeowners talking about it. That actually kind of surprises me, because usually we act in our self-interest, and you might say, oh, that climate change thing, that's important, but you go about acting in your self-interest. That's a big change. You know, I'm seeing that across the spectrum, from corporate folks to individuals to community folks. That's kind of a surprise, because, you know, climate change is not a new issue. It's 30, 40 years old. But it's got a lot of traction now. The really big thing that I take a lot of interest in is investment. And so what's changed in the last 5 years is this energy transition thing. I don't know how far we'll go. I don't know how many fossil fuels we'll use in 2030 or 2040 or 2050, but I do know there is a big revolution going on right now. So, you know, if you track the money, 80% of all new investment in power generation globally, according to Bloomberg, Reuters, numerous sources, is going to be in renewables. That's huge. That is trillions of dollars. And guess what? The stats already bear that out. It's happening. So they're reaching those numbers already right now. And the same thing's going to happen with green buildings. It's a little harder to track, but I'm seeing that in the green building space for sure. And obviously buildings are a big area of emissions. So, and the solutions there, I think what's cool about buildings is the solutions make our homes way better. And so, you know, people are really they're starting to catch on to this, and I think they'll really catch on to it in time. So yeah, investment. The car industry, that's the other.
That's a big one.
The other big box of emissions is transportation. And so the car industry never would have projected this. You know, most of the big guys were totally sluggish. You know, they dragged their heels for the longest time, and Tesla did what nobody expected them to do and rocked it.
Took the bull by the horns. Yeah, exactly.
And now every single car company in the world has moved their investment to renewables, something like $500 or $600 billion. And there's something like 500 to 700 models of new electric vehicles. It's coming at us like a storm.
Yeah. Well, and touching base on two of those points, so with the homes and buildings, the amount of organizations that have started to adapt, like you said, the technology and incorporate it into new builds. We've got a couple companies putting solar panels, come standardized with packages, waterless tanks, the instant water tanks, and then on the car end of things, some of these timelines have been really wild. Like even here in Canada, they've put out the mandate to have no combustion engines being produced in GM by 2030. That's mind-boggling, and the time frame is so tight. The governments have really adapted and adopted a lot of these, and been leaders in that sense. Even the United States has just signed a bill recently in regards to addressing climate change. Have you seen any? Are you surprised at? On our show we talk a lot with a lot of these big organizations, Shell, Alberta Industrial Heartland, Enbridge, and whatnot. I'm always shocked at the willingness and the investment that they have put into renewables, coming from traditional energy supplying and energy producing. Has that shocked you as much as well?
Well, there were some leaders in the early days. Some of the big companies, like Suncor was a leader in the early days. It's hard, though, because those conventional businesses, they still make their money the old-fashioned way with fossil fuels. And so it's really tricky for them as shareholder controlled companies to do this. But yeah, they are doing a lot of stuff, but I think there's a lot of incumbents too. And that's probably what scares them and others, is that, you get Elon Musk coming along out of nowhere, basically. And there's numerous companies like that that are coming out of the blue. So I think the race is on. And so you're right, though. The attitude change has been phenomenal. I was doing research for a story on utilities in Alberta, and Capital Power, we would think of them as the biggest, oldest coal company, basically. They produced, a lot of our coal-fired electricity for many years. That was their bread and butter. In, I don't know when it was, 2015 or 2017, when the change came, when they accelerated the coal phase out, the companies were madder than hornets, and they tried to get compensation for stranded assets, and why wouldn't they? But once that was over and the dust settled, new world.
Absolutely.
New world. So Capital's plan is now to be net zero.
Yep.
Capital's planning on tons of renewables.
Their carbon capture program's insane.
They built hydrogen into their plants that they've converted. They're doing energy storage. And, Capital is probably not the most progressive company, but that's a huge sea change.
Yes.
Because they see where the future's going to be, and a lot of them are still figuring it out. Like, they don't have the answers yet. And so in Capital's case, for example, just because I'm familiar with it, they're betting on storage, they're betting on hydrogen, they're betting on carbon capture and storage. And, that's going to settle out in the next few years. And I really think economics will determine the pathway.
Right. Is there a trend that you're seeing? I mean, you've traveled from coast to coast across the nation. Is there a trend you're seeing that's picking up better in certain areas than in others? And how about adoption, the attitude towards adoption? Is the East keeping pace with the West or vice versa? Do you see anything like that happening?
Well, two areas. Okay. So buildings and energy. So buildings, Alberta led the way in the beginning with designing net zero buildings. We had Landmark Homes, a leader in all of Canada, maybe North America. They pioneered the idea of net zero homes, and they're a production builder. They're not a little niche builder. And I think what happened is they were actually so far ahead of the curve, the market wasn't even ready for it. They didn't understand it. They didn't understand the value proposition. That's all changing now. And so we have a lot of smaller builders who have a lot of expertise. We have Jamin that's now toying with net zero and has put solar on homes for quite some time now. But I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, I was contacted by a home building company in Guelph, Ontario, and they said, oh, by the way, our company's called TerraView Homes, and we're only going to build net zero, and we're a 30 or 40-year-old custom builder in Guelph, Ontario. And I thought, whoa. And they had already built 50 of them, and all their plans were to build just net zero. So at some point, the market shifted. There's starting to be an understanding of the value proposition of building an awesome home that uses 80 or 90% less energy. It's a terrific investment in a time of uncertainty about energy, about carbon taxes, about whatever else. People are starting to get it. And so there's a traditional home company in Ontario that has leapfrogged. Right?
Awesome.
And so now we're starting to see that happen here. And I think, we have the most amazing development in all of North America. We don't celebrate it very much. I have no idea why. Blatchford is the largest planned carbon neutral community I've found in North America, maybe in the world. It was a little ahead of the curve. They didn't really know how to do it when they started doing it. Took them a while to figure it out. The market wasn't ready. Now, I think that's all changing, and I think we're going to be very proud of that in time, because I think people are really going to latch on to that, and we're starting to see the big builders move in.
Right. Yes. It's nice to see that we can be a leader here over in the West, especially here in Alberta. All the stories you've covered from coast to coast, do you have any that stick out in your mind, specific topics or specific individuals?
Usually my favorite story is the last story I've done. But,
okay, yeah.
Because I handpick these stories. We don't usually do stories based on pitches. I get pitches every day in my email box, and sometimes I do them, sometimes I don't.
Gotcha.
We pick, and for the longest time, we picked stories that we hadn't done, that worked, were economic, and were already in the marketplace. So that was our test. Like, I didn't do hardly any stories on ideas.
Right.
Because I'll tell you, my inbox is also flooded with a lot of crazy ideas. And, many of them defy the laws of physics. And, I just don't want to deal with that.
I want to put a nuclear fusion in my basement.
And besides, there's so many good ideas that aren't, that deserve some attention and celebration and to move forward. So I'm going to give you a weird one, because I think this is right out of left field. One of the early stories I did was in Lindsay, Ontario. And it was a farmer. He's a dairy farmer, and his name was James Callahan. And I went there because he was one of the first biogas producers in Ontario. They supported that for a little while. And the idea is this dairy farmer produces a lot of manure from his herd. He sells cows. He sells milk. And he has cash crops. So that's very cyclical and, changes year to year. And so what he did was he installed a digester, which is a big round building with a membrane roof on it, where you capture all the emissions. You put all your manure in it, and he actually takes organic waste from the municipality, because that actually enriches the manure. Believe it or not, the organic waste is better than manure, if you can believe it. But together it's great. And so he collects that methane. He also has a big generator right next to it that generates electricity. So that generator produces electricity 24/7, a whole new stream of income for the farmer. It's moderate, but it's still 24/7 income. It helps the grid, because the energy that comes out of that, the electricity, is very high quality, and it's in a remote place. So it actually helps the grid become more resilient. But the drawback is it's fairly expensive energy. And so if you evaluate it just based on, okay, I can use solar, I can use gas, I can use whatever, you're going to look at the price of producing electricity using biogas on the farm, and you're going to go, no. But the thing is, I think we will get into this in time, I predict. And it's because you have to look at it from the multiple values that it brings. And so for him, if you look at climate change, he used to spread his manure in the field. That releases basically natural gas, methane, which is 40 times, or whatever the number is, worse than CO2. It's a big problem, actually. He's turned that into an income. So he solved an environmental problem. He doesn't have runoff issues from spreading manure, which used to be a problem as well. And it also gets rid of most of the odor. And so it's a really grand solution. You could imagine this happening in Alberta all over the place. Feedlots,
I was just going to say feedlots.
Food processors, and all kinds of things. We only have, believe it or not, 2 or 3 of these, and it just took grit and determination by the developers, because they're kind of going upstream. But I predict we will see and understand that value proposition in time. and you'll see a lot more of it, and it'll make farming a more diverse business.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up agriculture because, we've talked about building construction, we've talked about vehicles. Farming is such a key point and a key factor to our economy as Canadians as a whole. And so it's cool to see that there's something like that out there. Is there specific stories that you would like to see or cover more of, like certain topics that you'd like to put a bigger focus on, or do they all kind of blend in together? I mean, you said they all work together.
No, I try to cover new areas.
Yes.
And so my focus right now that I'm trying to dig into a lot is hydrogen.
Gotcha.
Because hydrogen's really big in Alberta right now. It's really big with industry. It's big with some jurisdictions. And, I've had presentations by advocates of hydrogen. It was so compelling. I was ready to buy shares until I went away and cooled down and thought, no, it's just another solution that still has to find its place.
Yes.
And I predict economics will help us sort that out.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of enthralled with it because hydrogen, on the surface, it looks like it can help us with big trucks and transportation, trains, maybe airplanes, industry, processes in industry. There are some companies, though, that think it can also do home heating, so build hydrogen neighborhoods.
Gotcha.
I personally think geothermal should be recognized a lot more than it is. And it's because there's no incumbents working on it. I think if there was an incumbent that went to the city of Edmonton and say, look, we'd like to, just like ATCO installed the gas in these neighborhoods before the neighborhood was built, we want to install geothermal in the neighborhood, district geothermal. I think that would be the utility of the future. You can do it with no emissions. It's freaking awesome because you suddenly have a heating system that's totally robust and a cooling system. So, what did your truck say the temperature was yesterday?
35. Unbelievable. Yeah. No, the geothermal is definitely, I think, an underutilized. My folks actually have geothermal in their home as well, and it's made a massive difference. And it's one of those things, like you said, if an incumbent came in and put some focus on it, like anything, once there's a magnifying glass on it, it gets done. And I think you're right on the hydrogen end of things. There's been a lot of buzz in that area this last little while. There's some new ideas coming forth, some new companies coming forth, and a lot of it's moving here into Canada. We just had the hydrogen conference here just a few months back, and that put a big spotlight over here. And you said, like you said, big industry. Edmonton Global's put a big focus on it as well. So I think that's going to start taking off as well. Well, David, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today. I love your stories. I like how positive you guys are. You're really looking for, and that's a refreshing look too. You're not looking to put anybody and nail them to the wall. You're looking to look at what can be done, where are the areas of opportunities, what are some things we can change, and that's always a refreshing look. So thank you for doing that, and keep up the great work.
Well, in contrast to the regular media and social media these days, that positive frame is kind of different.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, it's way more fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and exciting. You get to open people's minds. When people get negative, they shut off, and then there's no progress. And so to encourage that positivity and encourage that move forward, you're doing a great job at that. So
well, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
Good stuff. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right.